Hello and welcome back to Crafted by Corie. If you're new, I'm Corie. Welcome to my channel, and if you are returning, thank you so much as always for the ongoing support. I really appreciate you. Today I have a compilation of all of my Easter and spring DIYs year to date. So let's go ahead and get right on into the crafting.
DIY number 1.
For this project, I have these two, I'm going to call them rattan wreath forms from the Dollar Tree, and I've got a smaller version and a larger version. I'm going to be connecting them together, and to use that, you could use wire, but I have this, it's kind of the paper wrapped wire that I got off of Amazon. I do have it linked in my Amazon store. If that's of interest to you, you can find that in my description box, a link to my Amazon store. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this around. I'm also going to tuck the wire through some of the wreath form itself, just to try to provide a little bit more stability. You'll see here, I'm just gonna kind of try and tuck it through the actual wreath itself, not just around it. So kind of poking it in between the, again, I don't know if this is considered to be rattan or if there's some other term that's to be used for this, but I'm kind of putting it in between the strands of whatever this material would be considered. So once I have that all set, I'm going to take some of my burlap ribbon that I got from Costco. This is my Kirkland's ribbon that I'm always talking about, and I'm going to tie a length of it around the neck here. I'm just going to make a knot. This is going to be a very simple way of creating a bow. These are going to be my little tails for my bow in a moment. And then I'll take another length of the ribbon and I'll create my bow part. So I'm just going to unravel this a bit, and I'm going to measure off a little bit of ribbon. I think if I had to guess, because you all know I tend not to measure things all the time, but I would say there are probably about 3-inch loops. So on either side of the center, I've got a loop that's about 3, maybe 4 inches. I did not want this to be too large, so I also did it until I had 5 loops on either side. I just wrapped it around and around, and now I'm going to notch the middle. So fold it in half a little bit to find the center, and then just put a little teeny tiny notch on either side to grab some more of my little wrapped wire trim. Not trim, but that's what I'm using to connect the bow. So you could also use a chenille stem. I just decided to use this because I was already using it to secure the wreath forms together. And I'm going to fluff out all of my loops. I'm just alternating back and forth from left to right. And once I have that all fluffed up, I'll go ahead and use the ends of the the paper wrapped wire to go ahead and secure that on top of the knot that I created. And I did want this a little bit off center, so you'll see that it's kind of off to one side. You could certainly center this if you'd like. You can put it on the other side if you'd like. I've got mine kind of off to the right side of my little wreath forms here. Once I have it in place, I'm going to dovetail the ends, just folding that in half and cutting the ribbon at an angle. And you want the shorter part of the angle on the folded edge. So once that's done, I'm going to take a piece of burlap, and I folded it a little bit so that I could double up what I was doing. So I folded it here. I'm going to fold it actually again because I'm trying to preserve as much of my burlap as I can, and I also want to make sure that I've got the same shape and that it's kind of symmetrical. So I'm going to go ahead and cut here. I'm folding it over a little bit more because I was like, I don't need it to be quite that wide when I cut it, but going ahead and cutting an ear shape. So making our little bunny ears here. Once I have those, I'm going to take my wire, my paper wrapped wire again. I don't know if there's a technical name for that, but I thought at first I was going to weave it through the burlap, and then decided that was just going to end up unraveling it and it wasn't going to be what I wanted it. So I set a piece of my parchment paper down underneath, and I am going to get my glue gun here and just put out a strand of glue, yeah, whatever, a bead of glue. And then I'm going to secure down my wire. And notice I did get my little finger protector. Be real careful when you're working with the hot glue. I have been known to burn myself pretty badly. So in this particular instance, I decided I really needed to be using the finger protector because I'm pretty much putting my finger right down on where the glue is as I try to get this all situated. So just be careful when you do that. So getting this all along the outer edge, I did not put it along the bottom, just along the two sides. And then I'll go ahead with my wire cutters and snip that off. And then I will do the same thing with the other one. But you can see here, I'm going to be able to gather up that little base to create that ear shape. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing with the other. And then I am going to kind of gather the bottom as I started to show you before. And I'm using a little bit of hot glue just to keep it in place and get the shape of the ear that I want. Doing that with both, kind of flattening them out a little bit. Going to use some more hot glue here. And then I'm going to secure the top, so the smaller of the two wreath forms. This is our little bunny's head. Just going to secure that on there. And then I've got these really pretty peonies that I've had in my stash for quite some time. I had gotten these off of Amazon actually several years ago. I had gotten several different bouquets of them, and this is the last one that I have. But I just thought that they were really pretty, and I like the color scheme with the burlap. So I had pulled apart my pick, true to form, right? And I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put these. At first I thought I was going to do a little fluffy tail with some Dollar Tree microfiber cloth. I have that kind of off, I guess it's a dust cloth actually, or a mop dust head thing. But I decided I was just going to use the flowers instead, and that could serve as a little, not so much a fluffy tail, but it's going to be representative of the tail, right? Because it's obviously not a tail, it's three little flowers down at the base. But once I had everything where I wanted it, I'm securing it all with some generous amounts of hot glue. And just be aware that if your hot glue setting is on high, you might melt some of those little stems. So just be aware, you might need to help it a little. But let me know what you think of this. I am in love with it.
DIY number 2. I have a foam cone, a little Dollar Tree bucket. I have some moss, paint, chalk paints, and those little foam eggs. I have 36 eggs, and I'm going to divide them up into 4 different groups of 9 each. Did I do my math right? 9 each, yes. I'm gonna do 9 of them in the light pink. That is a vintage Victorian that I had lightened with white chalk paint a while back. I did celery, which was also lightened. And then this is pool, and then the yellow was sunny porch. Whew. And now I am just cutting a piece of foam core, tucking that down inside my little bucket, and I'm gonna move on to my styrofoam cone, using a bunch of hot glue and then my moss. If I had to do it again, I probably would not start with the moss. I would start with the eggs and then just put the moss in between in a way that I will be doing a little bit more later. But for whatever reason, I thought I probably should cover this with moss first. It's definitely a messy project, but using some hot glue on top of my little floral foam there to cover that with moss. And now I have these wires that I'd pulled out of some flower stems during another project, and I just kept them just in case. For the life of me, could not find my wooden skewers. I think I must be out of them. I thought I had them. couldn't use skewers, so this was my plan B. I'm just cutting it at an angle so it's got a sharp edge on either side of it. And as you saw, I stuck one end into the egg, and then the other end I stuck into the styrofoam through the moss. And I'm just gonna do that all over this little tree that I've kind of fashioned, so to speak. Now, when I started, I was putting them way close together, and then as I was working my way down, I realized I was going to run out of eggs if I kept putting them so close together. So I began spreading them out a little bit more, and I did see how they're all clustered together at the top there. I did spread them out a little bit here and there, but they got a little bit looser towards the bottom. But at any rate, I went ahead at the end and tucked in some of this moss. So you see me just applying hot glue in between the eggs where there are kind of holes, if you will, and I'm just filling that in with the moss, and it worked out really well. I think this project is super cute. I hope that you're enjoying it as much as I am. I love it. So once I had my little tree all done, I fashioned some longer wires, and I'm going to stick them into the bottom here, and then I'm going to I've got 3 of them, and I'm going to use that to secure it into the floral foam in my little bucket. So just very carefully pressing that down in, making sure it's all nice and straight and secure, and that's it. You'll have to let me know what you think of this project. DIY number 3. All right, I have these cute little bunnies. These are from my sweet subscriber Rose, who inspired me on the last project, and I am going to take off their little tails as well as that hanger on the one, and then I'm just gonna sand off the places where their tails were to get everything nice and smooth and ready for paint. This is my Adirondack white chalk paint. And I'm going to give the bunnies several actually coats of the white. I think I ended up with 3 or 4 coats just to make sure that everything was nice and covered up. So once they were all set with that, I started mixing some paint colors. So I've got my celery that I'm putting into that first jar. This is provincial blue, and this is my Victorian I know what it's called, you guys. I will think of it. Vintage Victorian. There we go. And then you saw me adding white. I just wanted to lighten up these colors a little bit more for these little bunnies. I am now taking my Scotch tape and I am creating stripes. I've got 2 pieces right next to each other. The second one is just serving as a spacer until I put down the third piece. I'm sure you've seen people do this before, myself included, just spacing out my tape stripes so that everything is uniform as far as making my stripes on my bunnies go. And then once I had all of that done, I came in with my little sponges and I dabbed on the paint in the exposed areas. So I've got my vintage Victorian, my provincial, and my celery, but again, these are all mixed with white, so they're all lighter than the originals. That's the great thing about paint. You can mix pretty much any color you desire. So I'm peeling off my tape. At first I thought I was going to do buffalo check with these, but then I decided I just wanted to do something different. I've been doing a lot of buffalo check, and so I figured why not do little polka dots. So this is just the back of one of my paintbrushes, and I'm dipping it in the full color, if you will, of my paints. So not the mixed with white. This is the full density. I'm not sure what you would say, but this is the celery, and then the provincial blue in its full glory, as well as the vintage Victorian that's going on the pink bunny. And now I've got these little eggs I'm going to use along with this piece of microfiber towel from the Dollar Tree. You can see I have already used it for another project on another video, but I'm just going to be cutting out some pieces to be able to cover up these little eggs. And then I'm going to wrap the eggs completely. At first I was trying to use Mod Podge to cover this because I was afraid to use too much hot glue on it for fear that it might melt my little egg styrofoam forms. But finally I realized I really needed the hot glue in there to get that nice bond, that instant bond that I needed. And so I was just super careful, and I didn't apply it directly to the styrofoam. I applied it to the fabric and then gave it a beat and then adhered it to the foam. So then I gave it a good amount of glue and attached it to my bunny. I'm standing the little bunny up there so that we can make sure that it's all being set in the right place. Now he was rocking because he is round and so is the egg. So I went ahead and grabbed my little wooden blocks from the Dollar Tree out of my stash, and I'm just attaching one to the back of the little bunny guy to prevent him from rolling on us, and gave a little bit more stability as well. So did the same thing with the green bunny and the pink bunny, and then we had our set of 3. Let me know what you think. DIY number 4. I have these little bowls from the Dollar Tree as well as a mop head. I am going to just grab out one of these little bowls. So cute. I'll set the others away for another time. And I'm going to be using a lot of hot glue. I'm going to be calling this mop head yarn, for lack of a better term, because I don't know what else to call it. So as you can see, I put a good amount of hot glue at the bottom, and I am going to be wrapping this yarn around and around. I started at the center of the bowl, and I'm just going to keep making my way around. And this obviously is turned upside down when I started, so I'm just starting with the outside, wrapping it around the entire edge. So once I'd gotten all of the bottom done, I went ahead and started up the sides. Once I've got all of that done, I'm trying to figure out how I want to create my handle. So thinking, and then I grabbed this wire that is wrapped in paper. I got this on Amazon. It's in my Amazon store, and the link to that is in my description box if that's something you'd like to check out. But I am grabbing 3 lengths of the wire. I'm just kind of bending it at the ends where I want to have it end, and then I cut it off. I did trim each of the pieces, and I kind of wove them together in a loose braid, so to speak. And I'm gonna kind of give it some curvature and fit it inside my little bowl using some hot glue on both sides. And then once that's cool and set, I continued on with wrapping my yarn. So now I'm gonna wrap it around the handle. I was about halfway to the handle, so I finished getting to the handle, and I'm wrapping it around and around the handle all the way up and over until I get to the other side. Once I've done that, I'll go ahead and continue along with wrapping it around my bowl. Once I have the top edge all done, I'm going to start working my way inside the bowl because I want this completely covered with my yarn, inside and out. So down on the inside, again, a generous amount of glue. I'm just going to wrap it around and around until I make my way all the way into that little center. Once I'm almost there, I'm obviously using a little bit more hot glue, but I'll grab my scissors. I'm going to trim this off. And then I'm going to tuck that little end into the center where there's some hot glue and just kind of massage it until I get it to lay flat and all tucked in. Isn't it cute? I love this little basket. DIY number 5. All right, my sweet subscriber Rose sent these to me. I'm having trouble talking this evening as I record this, you guys, so bear with me. But they are these wonderful little wooden cutouts, and obviously you piece them together to create eggs. And I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with them, so ultimately I decided I was just going to stain them. I figured, you know what, simple little project that could have quite a big impact. This is probably a little bit boho, but I think it's just really classy. So with the stain, and then I'm going to be distressing it with white in just a moment, but I'm using a baby wipe just to apply my Antique Wax by Waverly. One of my subscribers recently asked me why the baby wipes, and it just helps the wax to glide on easily and not with a really heavy deposit. So you have a little bit more control over the color of the wax, the depth of the color. But then, as I mentioned, I came back in with some of my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I distressed it just with a really dry brush, just sweeping over all of those surfaces. And then I pulled out my little narrow ribbon. I think this is 1/8 of an inch, if I'm not mistaken, but I am just wrapping it around my fingers about 6 times, and I'm sorry I'm a little out of frame there. And then I tied it off in the middle with another little piece. Just tied a simple knot around the center of it to cinch it together. And then I went ahead and I fluffed up all of my little loops to create just a sweet little bow. Nothing too fancy, it's just a little finger bow. And then I'm gonna go ahead and apply it to the top of my egg. So a little bit of hot glue right on the top and making sure that my egg is, equally spaced around all 4 corners. And then I did the same thing with the smaller one. And then just trimmed off the little ends there and I was all done. DIY number 6. All right, I have a bunch of different kinds of yarn and my little eggs. I also have my sisal rope there, my narrow stuff. And I am starting out with just a little bit of hot glue. I kind of brought it up and then to the point, if that makes sense. So using more hot glue, I'm just going to wrap this around and around on itself. And I didn't start with just that little end because I didn't want the end to be sticking out or fraying or whatever else. And so you can see here that I'm kind of wrapping this around and over top of that end. So that's how I decided I was going to hide my starting point. And I'm going to use a little bit more hot glue, kind of just in some key places, and wrap and wrap and wrap all the way to the other point of my egg. Now, you want to make sure that your hot glue isn't too hot because it will melt these little foam eggs. You could also use plastic eggs. You could use whatever kind of eggs you want because clearly we are wrapping this completely and you're not going to see it anymore. So once I have it to the other end, I'm tucking that end in and just, again, I massaged it to get it to where I wanted it. And it was nice and secure and that little end was hidden. So now I'm going to be doing the same thing with some of my other twines and my sisal rope. This one is one that I'd gotten from my friends at burlapfabric.com. And again, just wrapping and wrapping. And as I did this, I thought, you know what, this is so pretty with the variation in color. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to go back later and do something more with the pink. But I was still kind of thinking through what I was going to do on that one. But it did inspire me to double these up. Originally, I was planning on just doing everything solid colors, but I'm really happy that I didn't because I think that doubling the colors really gives it a little bit more interest. But you can do whatever you'd like. You do you. If you prefer the solid colors, go for it. my yarns weren't super bright in color, so they're a little bit more muted, so to speak. So I think the variation worked well. I didn't want to take my flame to this to burn off the little sisal strands, so that was why I was using my scissors there, because I wasn't sure what would happen if I had the flame near the purple yarn there. But here you can see I am taking my purple yarn again, and I'm just going to create a fun little stripe up and around my pink egg. So then for the next one, I decided to double up with my blue and my yellow. These are both yarn this time, and it's just the same process the entire time for all of these. My other egg, I did yellow and pink. And once I had them all done, you can make as many or as few as you want, but you can see them all there. And then I can just pop them into my little basket if I want, or I can lay them around on my tiered tray, whatever makes my heart happy at the moment. Let me know what you think. DIY number 7. All right, I have a Dollar Tree calendar. I'm going to select the April image and just pull that out. I thought this little bunny was so cute. And then I have a wood round. That's been in my stash for quite some time. I think I might have picked it up at Michael's. I'm not 100% sure. My guess is that it was under $10, but again, I'm not exactly sure. But I traced out the shape, and then I was looking at it and decided after I cut it that I didn't really want the cut edge. So I pulled out my little water brushes from the Dollar Tree. I guess that's what you call it. You fill it with water, and it's like it's a water brush. Okay, so I went ahead and I used that around the edges of my calendar page just so that I could rip this off and make the edges a little bit ragged. Once I had that all set, I'm going to apply it to my wooden circle. I thought about using Mod Podge, and this is I Love Plaid, but I wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to bubble, and I didn't have a water bottle with me to spray it. I've had people tell me if you spray it first, you won't get the bubbles. So I just used my spray adhesive, and it worked like a dream. And then I used my plaid little roller squeegee to make sure that it was nice and adhered. So now I'm back here with my Waverly wax, and if you're not familiar with Waverly, or if you are familiar with Waverly but you're not familiar with the fact that it's a plaid product, surprise, all of the Waverly chalk paints, those are all plaid products. All of the home decor chalk paints are also plaid products. My goodness, get the words out, Corie. But as you can see, I'm just kind of going over even onto the little image itself to blend that wax in. And now I have selected some greenery. I'm going to be using boxwood for this. And true to form, if you've followed me at all for a little while, you know I like to cut apart all my picks. So I'm just using one single pick for this. And this is something I got on Amazon. The link to my Amazon store is in my description box if that's something you're interested in checking out, because you'll be able to find a lot of the supplies that I use in my Amazon store. But I gathered up the little bunches on either side, and I'm just using some leftover wire that I'd pulled off of a thing of chicken wire, if you can believe it. And I held on to the wire that was holding it together. So I'm just using that, and then my staple gun to adhere it to the wood round. This wood round is pretty solid. I would say it's probably almost ½ an inch thick, if not a full ½ inch thick. And now I've got my burlap ribbon. I'm going to be creating a bow. I am just rolling it up on itself for this particular bow. And if you are interested in a bow tutorial, I do have one out on my channel, and I will make sure that I put a link in the description box to that tutorial because I'm not going to be going into great detail on how I create the bows. I'm just going to kind of run right through it here. But I rolled it all up on itself. I'm going to go ahead and clip the at the center, just a notch on either side. You don't want to cut too far in. Using another piece of that extra wire, that leftover wire, whatever you want to call it, I am using that in the middle. So sometimes I use chenille stems. Today I'm just using a little piece of wire because I had it handy and it worked for me. Then I'm going to pull apart all of my little bow loops, and it'll be ready to wrap its little tails. Yes, we're going to create tails. So tying that around the middle. Probably should have done that before I fluffed it because I'm just going to end up having to fluff it again. But I knotted that off and then made sure my tails were facing the way that I wanted them. Fluffed up my little bow again. Dovetailed my ends, just folding it in half and clipping it off at an angle. And then I'm ready to go ahead and adhere this. I put down a generous amount of hot glue, and then I'll go ahead and set down my little bow right there. And then for the hanger, I'm going to cut off another piece of the burlap. I'm just going to create a little bit of a loop there and trying not to crush my bow. I was thinking I probably should have done this before I put the bow on at the bottom, but you know, so trimming off the ends because I like everything to be nice and neat, even if you're looking at the back. And then I'm going to use my staple gun again to adhere this because hot glue doesn't really stick real well to wood long term. So therefore the staple gun. But let me know what you think. DIY number 8. All right, I have this little egg crate that I'd gotten at the Dollar Tree. It had gold eggs in it, I think, at one point. I've got a bunch of colored eggs I'm putting in there. I've got another of my little foam eggs and this microfiber cloth from the Dollar Tree. I'm going to cut off another section and I'm wrapping my egg. I'm going to have the ends at the pointy part of the egg, if that makes sense. I grabbed a little rubber band. I thought about hot gluing this and then I thought, you know what, let me just tie it off with a rubber band at the end. And so that was what I did. I figured that would make it as tight and secure as I would need without kind of gumming it up with the hot glue. So once I had that secured, I trimmed off the excess on that end, and then I can pop it into my little egg crate. Now I have some adhesive felt, self-adhesive felt, and I am drawing a kind of a quasi heart shape on the bottom there and just cutting that out. Once I have that done, I am going to take my pink felt and I am drawing some ovals and then some little circles, all of which I will also cut out and prepare to stick onto my little white upside down quasi-heart shape. So I'm taking all these little pieces and I am arranging the little tiny circles around the base of those little bumps, which will be our little bunny toes. I debated doing just 3 on each, and if I had to do it over again, I might have just stuck with the 3, but I ended up putting 4 little toes on for each little paw. And once I had those in place, I then also put the little oval pads. I was thinking that that was, in my mind, the way that a little bunny paw would look, but in hindsight, I probably would have done a slightly different shape. And it really didn't occur to me until I was editing this video and saw the way that it was looking, and I was like, you know what, I probably should have made it a circle or maybe more like a rounded triangle shape. But again, you do you make your little bunny paws the way you want them to look, and at any rate, this is how I had them. So then I put a little bit of hot glue on there. I have a pom-pom, my little white pom-pom sticking on there for the tail. We got our little bunny butt. Just checking to see where I want to place it. And I'm going to peel away, not the entire backing, only about the first, not quite half. So wherever I decided I was going to adhere it, so just enough to be able to adhere it to my little bunny body there. And now I'm taking some very narrow ribbon. I think this is like 1/8 of an inch. I think that's the size of it. But using the little holes in the egg, and I put it in through the outside and then popped it back up through the inside. And I'm going to tie just a regular tie your shoelaces bow, something very simple. I'm going to fuss with it here for a minute just to get it the way I want it and the size that I want it and all of that. And once I have it where I want it, I'll go ahead and I will trim off the ends and I can pop it into my little crate. I'll do that with all of them. And that's it for this project. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 9.
All right, I have a bunch of these little letters from my sweet subscriber Rose, as well as a blingy butterfly, a Dollar Tree egg sign, and my plaid stencil. I'm going to be using the back of this sign. I'm giving it a coat of Sunny Porch by Home Decor, and I'm going to give it 2 coats. So once I've got it completely coated, I made sure that it was dry, and then I came in with a second coat. I tend to go in the opposite direction for coverage. Now I've picked out a bunch of different colors. These are also plaid paints. I believe they're called folk art. Some of them are folk art, some of them have different little names on them, but they're all plaid. So I am coming in and coating each of these. I love this little light purple shade. It reminds me of periwinkle, which is actually the Pantone color of the year. Fun fact. But I'm doing each of these letters a different spring color, and then I'll go ahead and set them aside to dry until I'm ready for them. Pulling out my stencil, I'm going to go ahead and lay this down in the middle of the egg. I got it all lined up, and I'm going to be using Pool with my plaid stencil brush. Now, y'all, I need somebody to tell me what I'm doing wrong here, because I thought I would get paint on the stencil brush and just be able to dab it, and the paint just wasn't coming off onto my project. So eventually I started kind of sweeping it more like a regular paintbrush as opposed to dabbing it. I don't know what I was doing wrong. So if you are a big stenciler, and this is my first time using a stencil brush, so let me know what the trick is. I made it work, but I'm sure I wasn't doing it right. So once that first section was completely dry, I went ahead and lined up my stencil again. And I am taking the pattern out to both edges. So I did the right side and then the left, and so I have a complete pattern here. I thought about doing the top and then decided I would rather write some words up there. So I was air drawing, if you will, because I am very visual. You may have heard me say in the past, and I have to kind of picture where my letters are going to go before I commit to putting them down. You could certainly use a pencil first. I just, and sometimes I do use a pencil first, but I just decided I was going to go for it. If you are interested in a hand lettering tutorial, a very basic for beginners hand lettering tutorial where I show you exactly how I do this, I will also link that in my description box because I have a tutorial for that as well. But I'm just creating a faux calligraphy look by using my downstrokes to thicken up those letters, and that's really all there is to it. So now I'm taking my dry spring letters and I'm placing them on the egg. I had them there and decided I was going to move them up a little bit higher, so that's what I did. And then I just used a little bit of hot glue to secure each of the letters down. And I found that a little bit went a long way with this. And I know I mentioned earlier that hot glue doesn't work real well on wood, but it does seem to work real well on chalk paint. So I had that going for me.
But I am now going to be using these other little pieces of greenery. I think these are considered eucalyptus. I got them off of Amazon as well, so they are also in my Amazon store. I had just trimmed off the little pick ends and then secured them with hot glue, as you saw. And now with this sweet purple ribbon, I am creating another bow. So if you want to learn how to do this bow, this is a different kind that I also did in the bow tutorial. So you are welcome to go and check that out after you finish watching here. And the playlist, don't forget about the playlist. So I fluffed up all of my little bow loops, put down a good amount of hot glue, and then I adhered it to the base of my egg. So now I've got this blingy little butterfly, and I knew it was going to be sweet somewhere on here. Again, I'm very visual, so I'm placing it around all over, trying to figure out where it should live. It does have a little clip on it, so I'm just trying to figure out if I'm going to be able to use the clip or if I'm going to have to take the clip off and just hot glue it. But I figured, you know what, let me try and create a hanger first. So I cut off another little length of ribbon, and then I decided I needed that hole to be a little bit wider, but my drill was upstairs in one of the closets because Rich and I have been working on our closets with a new closet system, and so I just used the drill bit because I didn't feel like going to get the drill, but it worked out just fine. I tucked my ribbon through, and then I brought the ends around behind to tie behind the loop. Hopefully that makes sense. But then I'm just going to adhere those down, and I did not show it, but I always like to finish off my projects with some craft paper on the back, just so that the project is completely finished. But you can see how I had done that little loop, and then I hooked on my little butterfly. So sweet. Let me know what you think. DIY number 10.
All right, I have a box. It's a box from Amazon, and it is filled with all of these pre-painted little beads. Again, this can be found in my Amazon store. I just thought that these were awesome. The buffalo check, stole my heart as soon as I saw it. And I'm just taking some regular twine that I had in my stash because it was the thinnest without being thread. I needed something hardy, obviously, and the whitest thing that I had in my stash. But you could use yarn or whatever it is that you have that will work for this. And I am just creating a pattern with the white, gray, buffalo check, black. I've repeated that for as long as I decided I wanted it, and now I have a little bunny wooden cutout from the Dollar Tree. I am painting this with my silver lining chalk paint by Waverly, giving both sides a good coat except for the tail, which I am now going to paint with my Adirondack white once my gray was dry. Again, painting both sides of this, and then I'm going to set that aside to dry for a minute while I create a tassel. I am using that same mop head yarn again. I'm going to wrap it around my little cardboard piece several times. I think this piece is about 5 inches wide, I think. But you know what? You create your tassels to whatever dimension you would like. It doesn't have to be exactly what I'm doing. I find that depending on the size of the project, you want to make your tassels larger or smaller. This yarn is very, very thick, so there was that to take into consideration as well. So once I had that tied off at the top with another piece, I created a loop down there at the bottom, and I am going to wrap and wrap and wrap and secure it through that loop, pulling that up through. And I realized I had kind of done it a little bit differently than what I had intended, but it all works out in the end. I have not trimmed off the ends yet. I just decided it would be easier to work with it this way before I trimmed the ends. But at any rate, I'm going to go ahead and trim the ends now. Once those are all cut, I'm going to go ahead and fluff it, get all of the strings lined up, and then I'm going to go ahead, trim off that one end, and trim all of the bottom pieces. Just make sure everything is nice and even and
Yeah. Nice and even. Once that is done, I decided to go ahead and wrap that other length around again. So I created another loop through which I could pull my end. Went ahead and wrapped that because I didn't want anything sticking out from the top. Tied that off so everything was nice and tight and not going to come undone. Set that aside for a minute and I'm back to my bunny. I'm going to create some little eyes for him, just making kind of some relatively large ovals for his eyes. Or her eyes. We don't know if this is a boy bunny or a girl bunny. Your bunny can be whatever you want. And then I'm taking some of my vintage Victorian chalk paint, and this is by Home Decor, and creating just the inside of our little bunny's ears. I did the same thing on both sides. Teeny bit of white to make our bunny look alive and happy, and set that aside to dry again. Now I have got my garland, the beads, on my needle still, so I'm tucking that through the top of the tassel, and then I'm going to tie that off. So just wrapping that around the top a couple of times, tying it, and then I'm going to take the needle and put it back up through the well, I guess I decided I was going to trim it first. So I'm going to rethread my needle, and I'm going to take that back up through the first 4 beads, because this is how I hide my end from having tied on the tassel. So just going to work my little needle out, trim off the end, and my end is hidden inside the beads. I tightened up my string on the with all the beads, and now I'm adding my little bunny to the end. I had just looped it, created a loop through there, and then took the end and put it through the loop, and then just tightened everything up. Wrapping that around a few times, I'm going to tie that off as well. And once I have that tied just below the first bead, I know it's a little bit hard to see here with my fingers in the way, but I went ahead and rethreaded the needle, and I'm going to hide it inside there again. Trim off the string, and our little garland is done. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 11.
All right, I have a bunch of this floral wire from the Dollar Tree, as well as some more eggs. Lots of eggs today. I'm going to pull out 6 of these little foam eggs, and then I'm going to be taking some old skewers that I have in my stash that I use for painting. I'm just going to secure the bottom of the eggs with each of these skewers. This is temporary, just so that we can get our little eggs painted. This is crystalline. I think it's called crystalline. It's either crystal or crystalline chalk paint by either Waverly or Home Decor. I think this one is Waverly, but I set them aside to dry in my little floral foam, and now I am taking my wire and I'm wrapping it around, starting at a little below the fattest part of the egg, and wrapping it around and around towards the base. So it's going from wider to tighter, and then I'm going to flip it around and go from tighter up to wider, if that makes sense. And I'm using the pointier part of the egg to create this shape. So it's basically going to have larger circles at the top and bottom, and then it kind of cinches in a little bit in the middle. And I'm going to trim that off when I have it to the size that I want, and make sure my egg will sit in there, and I created a total of 6 of these. Now I've got my Sharpie paint marker in gold. Once my eggs were all dry, I came in and I drew my letters. Now you can hand letter these the way that I am doing and just create whatever fun little font you want. I kept mine very simple. You could make it as embellished as you want. You could use stencils for these. You could use stickers for these. You do not have to hand letter it. You could use rub-on transfers for these. Whatever you have in your stash that you would like to use, you can use. So I went ahead and wrote out SPRING on each of my little eggs, and then I popped them into the little springs. So I have spring on springs, and I had been inspired by something that I had just seen briefly online. I thought it was super cute, but let me know what you think. And here we are with the final reveal of our tiered tray.
DIY number 12.
I have a Dollar Tree floor mat that we're going to be using, and then I have my Arteza paint markers. Now, the colors I chose to do this are representative of the colors I'm going to be using with chalk paint. I wanted to go ahead and get my letters drawn out, so I had a guide to follow. You are not going to be able to see these on camera. I am sorry for that. Maybe you can see them a tiny little bit, but as I use the chalk paint on them in a minute, you will see them much more clearly. For my little bunny designs that I'm drawing at the bottom here, you can actually see these much better with this particular color, and so you kind of get an idea of where I'm going with this. But you could certainly use stencils to do this. I opted to hand letter it, and obviously I'm painting it by hand here as well. Now, these mats take a lot of paint, so I am being super generous with the paint that I'm picking up on my brush. I am using more of a narrow brush though, because I want to keep my letters from kind of falling together too much. I had some rather long words that I was using, so I didn't want my letters to be too thick. I probably could have come back in and done the faux calligraphy with them. I opted not to this time. I'm not really sure why. It just didn't even occur to me. I was kind of just liking the simple font that I put on here. But as you can see, I'm going back in and filling it in here and there with extra paint. The color that I used for the welcome part was my Celery by Waverly. And this color is my Vintage Victorian. I believe this one is Home Decor. I'm trying to look at the bottle. They're both plaid products, and I am always trying to remember if my chalk paint is Home Decor or Waverly, because I confuse them because I have them all mixed in my drawer. But they're both fantastic products. I love them and use them all the time. But just filling that in, and then I'll go ahead and get my little bunnies filled in just a moment once I have all of my other words filled in. And for this one, I am using my plaster, and this is Waverly. I used a wider brush for the bunny bodies, and now I'm coming back in with a smaller brush for the ears, and even a smaller brush to create the little bows that I'm putting on them. On the right, I used agave. On the left, I used provincial, and the middle, I used lilac. And now this is silver lining that I was using to create little tails. Now I'm going to spray it with Flex Seal. One of my sweet subscribers told me about that to protect it. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 13.
Alrighty, for this project I have a bunch of little Easter eggs that my sweet subscriber Rose had sent me, and then I also have some leftover pieces of skewer from the Dollar Tree that I had cut down from another project. I'm getting out my drill. I'm going to find a drill bit that is the same size as my skewer piece so that I can kind of drill a hole through which I can insert my little skewers. So I drilled that, got it all cleaned up, stuck my little dowels in there, and I'm going to create, I guess, a banner of sorts, if you will. So I went ahead and I glued this down. I was thinking that it might be enough to support my little banner of eggs. It turns out that that did not work out quite as I had planned, so I did end up having to go plan B, but I'll show you exactly what I did. In the meantime, while that wood glue was drying, I came in with my white Adirondack chalk paint and I painted some of the letters that I wanted to use for this project. I got my eggs all lined up in the order that I wanted them, and then I started applying my sticker letters to my eggs. Now, if I had to do it again, I would have done this after I threaded the eggs together, because I was placing the bottom of these stickers just over the seam. These eggs open up to put little treats in. So it all worked out in the end. I was able to manage, but I would actually put the stickers on afterwards if I had to do it again. So I have this little green cord I'm going to be using. I was thinking I might be able to use a needle. It wasn't going to work, so that was why I ended up having to pop these open. So I was just very careful not to rip my little letters. So each of these eggs happened to have two little holes in the top of them, so it was perfect for what I wanted to do. So I just went ahead and threaded the string through each of the tops of the little eggs, just being careful with that sticker. I just kind of lifted the base of it, popped the egg open, threaded my little cord through, in and then out, and I did that all along, and then sealed up the egg again and pressed my little sticker down, and voila. But goes to show why I was saying if I had to do it over again, I would have put the stickers on afterwards. But once I had them all strung, I spaced them out, made sure that they were all nice and even, so with the same amount of distance between each. And I just think these are so cute. Now, I just was trying different things afterwards, and I couldn't really come up with anything that I was really loving at the time. I do feel like this project is a little unfinished, so I would love for you to tell me what you would do when you see the end product. I was thinking about maybe greenery or flowers down at the base, or maybe a little flower on top of each egg or something like that. But let me know what you would have done when you see the end of this. But in the meantime, I am attaching the cord to the top of my dowel, and this is where I'm starting to feel like, you know what, this is a little bit wobbly. I'm starting to put my thinking cap on and trying to figure out how I'm going to, what my plan B is going to be, because the dowel just was it was too much weight on the dowel and it was pulling it forward. So I'm going ahead and just securing the other end while I'm thinking about it, getting all of my pieces situated and together. And here I'm like, oh, I've got my egg turned around the wrong way. So my thought was, if I had that big part of the egg on the inside, it would help to support the whole thing, which it does, but it's the dowels and those connections to the base that is just too weak. There's not enough there to support the dowel, because those base pieces are super thin, as you can see. So I ended up pushing them down further through, and I've got this ruler from the Dollar Tree that I'm going to use as an extra support. So I'm pushing the dowel down in through. I'm also going to kind of pull it out at a bit of an angle to provide some greater support to the weight that's in there. So as you can see here, I'm kind of angling it, I'm pulling it through a little bit more, I'm making sure that it's not going beyond the ruler, because when it sits on the table, I want it to sit flat. But I'm adding a whole bunch of wood glue there, and then I'll take a stripe of wood glue down and then apply the ruler to that entire section, but not over the dowel. The dowel is coming down as far as the ruler. I'm gonna go ahead and clip that with my Dollar Tree clamps, and I'm going to use a little can of spray paint to help hold it up and in place so that it doesn't end up glued to my table. And then I'll go ahead and I'll fashion the other end the same way, getting that all glued and ready. And then I'll go ahead, and get the other end attached. I'll secure that with my clips as well. And then at this point, it was able to just kind of lean up against the paint can, and I was able to leave it there to dry. And once it was all dry, I was able to remove the clamps. And here are my little eggs. Let me know what you would do to finish this off, because again, I feel like it needs something more, but it's still super sweet and makes my heart happy. And leave me a comment, let me know what you think.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I hope that you enjoyed the compilation. If you did, please give me a big thumbs up and be sure to leave me a comment. It really does help my video to get noticed by YouTube, and it helps my channel to grow. I appreciate you all so much. And until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Thank you so much for watching. Take good care. Bye.